At my graduation party, I saw my father slip powder into my champagne glass. He wanted to ruin me in front of everyone. So I stood up, plastered a warm smile on my face, and walked right over to my golden boy brother. "Looks like your glass is getting warm," I said, handing him mine. He smirked and drank what was meant for me. 10 seconds later, his eyes rolled back, and he hit the marble floor. "Thank you for being here. Please comment the letter Y, so I know you are ready. Sit back and listen to me tell the whole story." The Skyline Terrace ballroom was completely silent for a fraction of a second. It was that kind of heavy, suffocating silence right before a bomb goes off. The crystal flute shattered against the polished marble floor. The sharp crack echoed off the high ceilings, followed instantly by the heavy, lifeless thud of my brother, Elijah, collapsing. I stood exactly 2 feet away from him. I did not gasp. I did not reach out to catch him. I just watched. My mother, Evelyn, let out a scream that sounded more like a wild animal than a high society hostess. She dropped her own glass, the champagne soaking into the hem of her designer gown, and threw herself onto the floor next to him. "Elijah! Elijah! Look at me! Somebody call an ambulance!" she shrieked. Her perfectly manicured hands clawed at his tuxedo jacket. My father, Arthur, froze, the color completely drained from his face. His jaw locked, and his eyes darted from Elijah's convulsing form directly to me. For a split second, the mask slipped. The polished, wealthy CEO facade shattered, revealing the terrified, guilty man underneath. He knew exactly what was in that glass because he was the one who put it there, and he knew that I knew. Guests started yelling. Chairs scraped loudly against the floor as people rushed forward. The string quartet in the corner abruptly stopped playing, their bows hovering awkwardly over their instruments. A waiter rushed past me, nearly knocking me over, shouting into his radio for medical assistance. The panic in the room was absolute chaos. "Back away! Give him some air!" a man shouted from the crowd. I took a slow step backward, letting the swarm of panicked guests and hotel staff swallow my brother and my parents. The flashing lights of the city skyline reflected in the spilled champagne at my feet. The golden liquid mixed with the broken glass, running in thin rivers across the marble. I felt my heart pounding against my ribs, but my breathing was perfectly steady. My mind was completely clear. For 26 years I had been the scapegoat. I had been the punching bag. I had been the shadow standing behind my brother's blinding, stolen spotlight. They thought they could erase me tonight. They thought they could drug me, drag me out the back door like a drunk, and ruin my reputation forever just to clear the path for Elijah's grand evening. They were wrong. My best friend, Wyatt, stepped up beside me. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. He just gave me a quick, hard nod. His phone was tight in his grip, the screen still glowing from the video he had just finished recording. The evidence was secured. The trap they built for me had just snapped their own legs. I looked at my father again. He was kneeling next to Elijah, trying to loosen my brother's silk tie with trembling fingers. Arthur looked up, his eyes meeting mine through the chaotic crowd. The hatred radiating from him was palpable. But there was something else there, too. Fear. Real, raw fear. He finally realized that the son he had treated like garbage for over 2 decades had just outplayed him in his own game. To understand how a family dinner turned into a crime scene, to understand why a father would try to poison his own son, and why I didn't hesitate for a single second to hand that lethal glass to my own flesh and blood, you have to know what they did to me. You have to know the absolute hell they put me through just 3 hours before that glass shattered. The story doesn't start with the poison. It starts with a smile. It starts with the moment I walked through the double doors of the Skyline Terrace ballroom, expecting a celebration of my college graduation, and realizing that I was walking into an execution. Let me take you back to 6 p.m., the beginning of the end. 3 hours earlier, the ballroom looked like a page out of a luxury magazine. Towering centerpieces of white orchids sat on every table. The smell of expensive roasted tenderloin and rich truffle oil filled the air. Waiters moved silently across the room, carrying silver trays of hors d'oeuvres. This party was supposed to be for me. I had just graduated near the top of my class with a degree in environmental engineering. I paid for every single credit hour myself. I worked nights. I worked weekends. I sacrificed sleep, a social life, and my own health to get that degree. My parents didn't pitch in a single dime, but they were the ones who sent out the gold-foiled invitations. They were the ones who rented this ballroom. They needed an excuse to throw a massive networking event to show off for their wealthy friends and potential business partners. My graduation was just a convenient theme. I stood near the entrance, adjusting my tie. No one greeted me. My parents were busy near the center of the room, laughing and clinking glasses with the local elite. Elijah was standing right beside them, holding court. He had graduated 3 years ago with a business degree he barely scraped by to get, but he was acting like this entire night was dedicated to him. I walked over to the seating chart displayed on a massive easel. I traced my finger down the alphabetical list of guests. I found Elijah's name instantly. Table 1. Center of the room, right in front of the stage. I kept scrolling. Down, down, down. Table 34. I walked through the maze of tables to find my seat. Table 34 was shoved into the absolute darkest corner of the ballroom. It was positioned directly next to the swinging metal doors of the kitchen. Every time a waiter pushed through, a blast of hot air and the deafening clatter of dirty dishes hit the table. My seat was facing away from the stage. I was literally staring at a blank wall. I sat down. The heat from the kitchen made the back of my neck sweat. This wasn't a mistake. My mother micromanaged every single detail of every event she ever hosted. Putting me here was a calculated insult. It was her way of keeping me out of sight, out of mind, and out of the photographs. Suddenly, the lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the main stage. The event coordinator grabbed the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this wonderful evening." The MC's voice boomed over the speakers. "We are here to celebrate success, hard work, and the incredible legacy of the Kelm family." The crowd politely clapped. "Let's give a warm welcome to our hosts, Arthur and Evelyn Kelm, and their remarkable eldest son, Elijah, who recently spearheaded the new downtown commercial development project." The applause grew louder. The spotlight swung to table 1, illuminating my parents and Elijah. They stood up, waving to the crowd. Elijah had that smug, effortless smile plastered on his face. The MC kept talking. He talked about my father's company. He talked about my mother's charity work. He talked about Elijah's future in the industry. He never said my name. Not once. The party was literally for my graduation, and the host didn't even mention the graduate. I sat at table 34, listening to the kitchen doors swing open and shut, completely invisible. 15 minutes later, the photographer started rounding up the family for official portraits near the flower wall. I walked over, forcing my posture to remain straight. I wasn't going to let them see me break. "Mason, get in the back," my father barked, not even looking at me as he adjusted his cuffs. "You're blocking Elijah." I stepped behind them. The photographer raised his camera. "All right, everyone," big smiles. As the flash went off, my mother leaned slightly backward. She didn't turn her head, but her voice sliced through the air, perfectly pitched so only I could hear it. "Smile, Leech," she hissed through her perfectly white teeth. The word hit me like a physical punch. Leech. That was her favorite word for me behind closed doors. Because I lived under their roof while paying my way through school. She acted as if my mere existence was draining their bank accounts. I clenched my jaw. A vein throbbed in my temple. I looked at the back of her head, feeling a cold wave of anger wash over me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table. But I didn't. I held my ground. As the photographer checked his screen, I noticed my father pulling out his phone. His hands were shaking slightly. He stared at a text message, wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead, and aggressively shoved the phone back into his pocket. My mother, noticing his panic, reached into her clutch to pay the florist who had just walked up with an invoice. She handed over a sleek black credit card. The florist ran it through a portable machine. It beeped. Declined. My mother's face flushed red. She quickly snatched the card back, handed the woman a different one, and shot a nervous glance around the room to see if anyone noticed. I noticed. Something was very wrong with the perfect Kelm empire. I walked away from the photo area, needing to put some distance between myself and my mother's toxic perfume. I headed toward the open balcony doors to get some fresh air. On my way, I passed a small group of older men holding whiskey glasses. In the center of the group was Mr. Sterling. Mr. Sterling was a titan in the real estate world. He was a billionaire, a ruthless businessman, and he had a daughter around Elijah's age. Everyone in the city knew my parents were desperately trying to set Elijah up with the Sterling girl. Elijah was standing right next to Mr. Sterling, holding a glossy, heavy stock portfolio. I recognized that portfolio instantly. It was mine. I stopped dead in my tracks. My heart dropped into my stomach. That portfolio contained my senior capstone project. It was a comprehensive, highly detailed blueprint for a commercial water purification system designed for large real estate developments. I had spent 8 months in the lab working on it. I spent my entire salary from my night shifts funding the research materials. It was the crowning achievement of my college career. It's a revolutionary approach to sustainable plumbing in high-rises. Elijah was saying, his voice oozing with fake confidence. He flipped to the centerfold blueprint. I noticed the massive water waste in our current developments, so I spent the last few months drafting this solution. I really think it could save developers millions. Mr. Sterling adjusted his glasses, looking genuinely impressed. This is brilliant, Elijah. I had no idea you possessed this level of engineering expertise. Your father must be incredibly proud. Well, Elijah chuckled modestly. I try to keep my head down and do the work. I stared at him, completely paralyzed by the sheer audacity. He wasn't just taking credit for a group project. He had gone into my room, stolen my physical portfolio, and was actively presenting my literal blood, sweat, and tears as his own genius idea to impress a billionaire. I took a step forward. My fists were balled so tight my nails dug into my palms. I was ready to walk right up to Mr. Sterling and tear that book out of my brother's hands. But before I could close the distance, Elijah laughed and pointed out the window toward the valet parking loop. I appreciate the kind words, sir. Actually, my parents were so thrilled with this design that they surprised me this morning, Elijah said, pulling a set of keys from his pocket. The silver crest of a Porsche dangled from his fingers. I looked out the window. Sitting directly under the hotel awning was a brand-new, midnight blue Porsche 911. A heavy, suffocating weight settled in my chest. They bought him a Porsche. My parents, who refused to give me $20 for textbooks when I was starving during finals week, bought my brother a 6-figure sports car as a reward for stealing my work. I backed away into the shadows of the hallway. I felt sick. The betrayal was so deep it physically hurt to breathe. They weren't just favoring him anymore. They were actively cannibalizing my life to feed his ego. I pulled out my phone and texted Wyatt. Meet me by table 34. Now, I made it back to my terrible seat just as the lights in the ballroom completely went out. A massive projector screen unrolled over the main stage. Soft, sentimental piano music started playing through the speakers. And now, a look back at the journey of our graduate, the MC announced. Wyatt slipped into the empty chair next to me. He took one look at my face and frowned. Dude, what happened? You look like you're about to murder someone. Just watch the screen. I whispered, my voice completely hollow. The video started. The first picture was of my parents holding a newborn baby in the hospital. But it wasn't me. It was Elijah. The date stamped on the bottom of the photo proved it. The slide transitioned. A family vacation to Hawaii. My parents smiling on a boat with 12-year-old Elijah. I remembered that trip. I was 10. I was the one who took the picture because my mother said I looked too messy to be in the frame. The slides kept coming. Christmas mornings, Thanksgiving dinners, high school football games. Picture after picture, memory after memory. And I was in none of them. Then, a picture flashed on the screen that made my stomach physically turn. It was a picture of my high school graduation. I remembered the exact moment it was taken. I was standing in my blue cap and gown, holding my diploma, with Elijah standing to my left and my parents to my right. But on the screen, the picture was cropped. They had literally sliced the photo down the middle. I was completely removed. All that was left was my parents, smiling proudly next to Elijah, who was bizarrely holding a rolled-up program that they were trying to pass off as a diploma. They had meticulously, intentionally erased my entire existence from the family history. They were showing hundreds of people a fabricated reality where Arthur and Evelyn Kelm only had one perfect, successful son. "Are you kidding me?" Wyatt muttered, disgusted. "They photoshopped you out of your own high school graduation?" Before I could answer, a loud, obnoxious laugh erupted from the table next to ours. It was Dylan. Dylan was a guy I went to college with. I spent dozens of hours tutoring him in calculus just so he wouldn't fail out his sophomore year. Now, he was sitting with my mother's friends, holding a glass of scotch and trying to network his way up the corporate ladder. "I'm telling you, it's a miracle Mason even graduated," Dylan said loudly, his voice carrying perfectly over the soft piano music. He was staring right at my mother, desperate for her approval. "Remember sophomore year? He literally failed his midterms. The guy is a total slacker." My mother smiled, taking a delicate sip of her wine. "We know, Dylan. We've tried our best with him, but some people just refuse to apply themselves. We practically had to drag him across the finish line." The rage inside me shifted. It stopped being hot and frantic, turned ice cold. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. Several heads turned toward me, including Dylan and my mother. I walked right up to their table. I didn't yell. I didn't lose my temper. I kept my voice incredibly calm, clear, and perfectly leveled. "Dylan," I said, "sophomore year, I missed my midterms because I was accepted into an exclusive academic exchange program in Germany, fully funded by the university. A program you applied for and were rejected from. And mother, my GPA upon graduation is 3.98, the highest in the engineering department." Dylan's face turned bright red. He stammered, looking down at his drink. My mother's fake smile completely vanished. Her eyes hardened into tiny, venomous slits. She hated being corrected, especially in public, and especially by me. "There's no need to cause a scene, Mason," she said coldly. "I'm not causing a scene," I replied, staring a hole straight through her. "I'm just fixing the narrative." I turned around and walked back to my table. Across the room, I caught sight of Aunt Sarah. She was my father's older sister, the only person in this family who ever treated me like a human being. She was standing near a pillar watching the entire exchange. She didn't smile, but she gave me a slow, deliberate nod of approval. The video ended. The lights came back on. The room felt heavy. The tension was finally starting to break the surface, and Arthur was about to make it so much worse. The polite applause following the slideshow quickly faded as my father, Arthur, walked up the steps to the main stage. He tapped the microphone. The high-pitched feedback echoed through the room, forcing everyone to look at him. "Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight," Arthur began. His voice was deep, resonant, and dripping with absolute hypocrisy. He put a hand over his heart, looking out at the crowd with practiced, fake emotion. "Family is the most important thing in this world," he continued. "When you are a parent, you make sacrifices. You do whatever it takes to ensure your children succeed. You carry the weight so they don't have to." I crossed my arms, leaning back in my chair by the kitchen doors. I knew exactly where this was going. "Higher education is an incredible privilege," Arthur said, his voice turning somber. "And let me tell you, it is not cheap." A few older men in the crowd chuckled in agreement. "We have spent tens of thousands of dollars over the last 4 years. We drained our accounts. We made hard choices to build a college fund to ensure that Mason could stand here today with a degree. It was a heavy burden, but we carried it gladly." The crowd erupted into applause. People were literally clapping for his financial sacrifice. A wealthy business partner of my father's, a man named Henderson, was walking past my table on his way to the bar. He stopped, looking down at me with a patronizing smirk. "You better appreciate what your old man did for you, kid," Henderson sneered. "Not many fathers would drop 50 grand on a college fund for a kid who clearly doesn't appreciate it. You owe him your life." The ice-cold rage inside me solidified into steel. I looked up at Henderson, my face entirely blank. "I appreciate nothing," I said, my voice loud enough for the tables around us to hear. Henderson stopped smiling. "Excuse me?" I stood up. I said I appreciate nothing, because my father didn't pay a single cent for my education. The murmur of conversation around us instantly died. People at the neighboring tables turned in their seats to stare at me. "I earned a full-ride academic scholarship my freshman year," I continued, listing the facts clearly. "I received the state STEM grant my sophomore and junior years. And for the expenses the grants didn't cover, I worked the night shift at a loading dock from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m., 5 days a week. My father hasn't contributed a dollar to my life since I turned 18. So don't tell me what I owe him." Henderson blinked, completely taken aback. He looked from me to Arthur on the stage, confusion written all over his face. The people sitting nearby began whispering to each other. The perfect illusion Arthur was trying to cast over the room had just cracked right down the middle. Arthur saw the commotion. He saw me standing. His face turned an ugly shade of purple, but he forced a tight, rigid smile and quickly wrapped up his speech. "Thank you all, enjoy the dinner," he barked into the mic before practically storming off the stage. I sat back down. My heart was racing. I had finally fought back. I had finally punctured their balloon of lies. Wyatt let out a low whistle. "Dude, you just dropped a grenade." "I'm not done," I said, and I wasn't. Before I could even catch my breath, someone tapped my shoulder. I spun around, ready for another fight. It was Aunt Sarah. She looked around nervously, ensuring no one from my parents' inner circle was watching us. She reached into her expensive leather handbag and pulled out a thick, manila envelope. She shoved it directly into my chest. "Take it. Put it away immediately," she whispered urgently. "What is this?" I asked, sliding the envelope under the tablecloth onto my lap. "Your father's real legacy," Aunt Sarah said bitterly. "I heard what you said to Henderson. You were right to speak up, Mason. But you don't know the half of it. They aren't just lying about paying for your school. They are drowning." I frowned, peeling back the metal clasp of the envelope under the table. "What do you mean, drowning?" "Arthur's company has been operating at a massive loss for 3 years," she whispered, her eyes darting toward the head table. "They are millions in debt. The house is mortgaged to the hilt. Those credit cards Evelyn uses? Maxed out. This entire party, that new Porsche outside? It's all a desperate facade to trick Mr. Sterling into giving Elijah a job and investing in the firm. If Sterling walks away tonight, your parents are filing for bankruptcy by Monday." I stared at her, my mind spinning. The declined credit card with the florist suddenly made perfect sense. The desperation to impress the billionaire. It was all a house of cards. "But that's not why I gave you this," Aunt Sarah continued, her voice trembling slightly. "Look at the second page in that envelope." I reached into the manila folder and pulled out a stack of papers. The first few pages were bank statements showing zero balances and past due notices. But the second page was a loan agreement. It was a personal loan from a high-interest private lender. The amount was $120,000. Exactly enough to buy a brand new Porsche 911. I looked at the signature line at the bottom of the contract. My blood ran absolutely cold. It wasn't Arthur's signature. It wasn't Elijah's signature. It was mine. He forged my name? I choked out, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. He took out a massive loan under my name to buy Elijah a car? "He used your social security number," Aunt Sarah confirmed, looking at me with deep, profound pity. Because his credit is completely destroyed. When this all comes crashing down, Mason, the bank isn't coming for Arthur. They are coming for you. You need a lawyer. Tonight. I stared at my forged signature. The betrayal was so absolute, so evil, that it transcended anger. My own father had chained me to a mountain of debt, ruining my financial future before my career even started, just to buy a shiny toy for his favorite son. They pushed too far, Aunt Sarah said quietly. Do what you have to do. She turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. I sat there in the shadows, holding the proof of my father's felony. I wondered if my mom ever considered divorce when the money ran out, or if she was perfectly fine going down with the ship as long as she looked good doing it. Before I could process my next move, my mother suddenly appeared at my table. She leaned down, her fingers digging painfully into my shoulder. If you open your mouth and humiliate your father one more time tonight, Evelyn hissed, her breath smelling of expensive wine and pure malice, I will personally make sure you never work in this city. Do not test me, Mason. I slowly turned my head. I looked directly into my mother's eyes. I didn't feel intimidated. I didn't feel scared. I just felt disgusted. A scene is just the truth with better lighting, Mother, I said softly. She flinched, genuinely taken aback by the dead, cold look in my eyes. She let go of my shoulder and practically ran back to the safety of her wealthy friends. I looked at Wyatt. We need to move. Now. I couldn't just sit there anymore. I needed air. I needed to think. I grabbed the envelope, shoved it into my jacket pocket, and stood up. Wyatt followed right behind me. We bypassed the main ballroom floor and ducked into the narrow, dimly lit service hallway that ran behind the kitchen. It was meant only for the catering staff, stacked with empty silver trays and extra linens. It was quiet here, away from the music and the fake laughter. I leaned against the cool cinderblock wall, pulling out my phone. I needed to find a lawyer. I needed to figure out how to report identity theft without ending up in jail myself. Mason, Wyatt whispered sharply, grabbing my arm. He pointed down the hallway. About 20 feet away, the door to the manager's office was cracked open just an inch. A sliver of yellow light spilled out onto the hallway floor. I heard voices, hushed, frantic voices. I crept closer, walking incredibly softly so my dress shoes wouldn't click on the tile. Wyatt followed, pulling out his phone and opening the camera app. He pressed record, holding the lens right up to the crack in the door. I put my ear close to the opening. It was my father, my mother, and my older cousin Julian. Julian was the event coordinator, the guy pulling the strings behind the scenes tonight. He's out of control, Arthur. My mother was whispering frantically. He embarrassed you in front of Henderson. If he walks over to Sterling and starts talking, he's going to ruin the entire deal. He's going to ruin Elijah's promotion. We will lose everything. I know, Evelyn, I know. Arthur snapped back. I could hear him pacing. The kid is a liability. We can't afford to have him talking. So what do we do? Julian asked. His voice was cold, entirely detached. I can have security throw him out. No, that causes a scene, Arthur said quickly. People will ask questions. We need to discredit him. We need everyone here to think he's unstable. There was a brief silence. Then, I heard the rustle of fabric. Julian, my father said, his voice dropping an octave. You still have those prescriptions? The heavy sedatives you take for your flights. My stomach plummeted. I stopped breathing. Yeah, I have a few capsules in my bag, Julian replied. Give me 2, Arthur ordered. Break them open. Put the powder in this napkin. Arthur, what are you doing? My mother asked. She didn't sound horrified. She sounded curious. We are going to neutralize the threat, Arthur said coldly. When the servers pour the champagne for the final toast, I'll slip it into his glass. It's strong enough to knock out a horse. In 10 minutes, he'll start slurring his words. He'll stumble. He'll look completely wasted, maybe even high. When he inevitably passes out or causes a disturbance, we will play the tragic, heartbroken parents. We'll tell everyone he has a terrible substance abuse problem. Security will carry him out the back door, and no one will believe a single word he says about the money or the project ever again. It's risky, Julian noted. It's necessary, Evelyn said. My own mother. Do it. Get the powder. I'll make sure the servers distract the table. I backed away from the door. I felt like the floor had just dropped out from under me. They weren't just terrible parents. They were monsters. They were actively conspiring to drug me, poison my body, and destroy my reputation, all to protect their pathetic lies. Wyatt lowered his phone. His face was pale, his eyes wide with shock. He looked at me, completely speechless. I didn't panic. The coldness inside me crystallized into something sharp and dangerous. I looked at Wyatt's phone. Did you get all of that? I whispered. Wyatt nodded, swallowing hard. Crystal clear audio. Got a good angle of Arthur holding the napkin through the crack. 2. Send it to me. Right now, I demanded. He tapped his screen, and a second later, my phone buzzed in my pocket. The file transferred. I had the murder weapon. I had the motive. I had the confession. What do we do? Wyatt asked, his voice shaking. Do we call the cops? Mason, they are trying to drug you. Calling the cops right now just stops the party, I said, my voice eerily calm. If I call the cops, Arthur will hire an expensive lawyer and claim it was a misunderstanding. They will spin it. I need to catch him in the act. I need everyone in that ballroom to see exactly who they are. I looked down the hall toward the glowing exit sign that led to the AV control room. We are going to let them play their game, I said, looking back at Wyatt. But I'm changing the ending. I walked briskly down the service corridor, bypassing the kitchen entirely. At the far end of the hall, elevated above the main ballroom floor behind a wall of tinted glass, was the AV control booth. I pushed the heavy door open. It was dark inside, illuminated only by the glow of massive soundboards and computer monitors. Sitting in a rolling chair wearing a headset was Luke. Luke was a freelance tech guy. I had seen him working various corporate events around the city. I also knew that during the setup for this party yesterday, Arthur had screamed at Luke in front of the entire catering staff because the microphone feed had a slight echo. Arthur had called him incompetent and threatened to ruin his business. Luke spun around as I walked in, yanking his headset down to his neck. Hey man, you can't be in here. Guests aren't allowed in the booth. I locked the door behind me. Luke, I need 2 minutes of your time. And I need a massive favor. He frowned, looking at my tuxedo. You're the youngest kid, right? The one they didn't mention. Yeah. Mason, I said, stepping closer to the main control deck. I pulled out my phone and held it up. I need you to connect my phone directly to the main projector feed, bypassing your laptop. Luke shook his head immediately, holding up his hands. No way, man. Your dad is already looking for a reason to fire me and withhold my pay. I am not hijacking the screen for whatever prank you're trying to pull. It's not a prank, Luke, I said quietly. I unlocked my phone, opened the video Wyatt had just sent me, and hit play. I turned the screen toward him. I let him listen to the audio of my father and mother planning to drug me. I let him hear the cold, calculating tone of Arthur Kelm preparing to poison his own son to save a business deal. Luke stared at the screen. The color drained from his face. His mouth fell open slightly as the video ended. Holy! Luke breathed out, looking up at me with wide eyes. They are going to drug you. They are going to try. I corrected him. I pulled the manila envelope out of my jacket and tossed it onto the console next to his keyboard. That's a forged loan document. My father stole my identity to buy that Porsche sitting out front. They are broke, Luke. Arthur is millions in debt. He's never going to pay your invoice for tonight. He doesn't have the money. Luke stared at the envelope, then back at my phone. The hesitation in his eyes vanished, replaced by a hardened resentment. He remembered the way Arthur had humiliated him yesterday. He realized he was working for a criminal who was going to stiff him on the bill anyway. What do you need me to do? Luke asked, his voice steady. I'm going back to my table, I said. handing him an auxiliary cable adapter. Plug my phone into the main feed. Keep the screen dark. When you see Elijah drop, you hit mirror screen and blast the volume to the absolute maximum. You make sure every single person in that room hears what they said. Luke took the phone and plugged it into the massive switchboard. When he drops, just watch table 1, I said, turning toward the door. You'll know exactly when to hit play. I walked back onto the ballroom floor. The energy in the room was shifting. The dinner plates had been cleared. The servers were moving efficiently between the tables, carrying silver trays loaded with crystal champagne flutes for the final toast. The grand finale. I walked back to table 34 and sat down. Wyatt was already there, his foot tapping nervously against the floor leg. I gave him a microscopic nod. Everything was in place. I forced my posture to relax. I slouched slightly in my chair, looking down at my hands, playing the role of the defeated, depressed son. I let the shadows of the kitchen doorway hide my face. A waiter stopped at our table. He placed a beautiful, tall glass of golden champagne directly in front of me. The bubbles drifted lazily to the top. It looked perfect. I didn't touch it. I kept my hands in my lap. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Arthur was walking toward my table. He was doing a brilliant job of looking casual. He stopped at the table next to mine, shaking hands with a guest, laughing at a joke. But his eyes were locked on my table. My mother, Evelyn, was standing near the center of the room, talking to Mr. Sterling. But she wasn't looking at him. She was watching Arthur. Arthur stepped away from the guest and walked over to my table. He stood directly to my right, leaning over me to pretend to adjust the placement of the silver fork next to my plate. "Make sure you drink up during the toast, Mason," Arthur said, his voice dripping with fake, fatherly affection. "It's a celebration." As he spoke, I watched his right hand. I didn't turn my head, but my peripheral vision caught the movement perfectly. He had a small white napkin palmed in his hand. As he leaned over, his fingers flicked open. A tiny, almost invisible shower of white powder fell directly from the napkin into my champagne glass. It hit the liquid with a tiny fizz, instantly dissolving into the golden alcohol. It was flawless, a sleight of hand worthy of a magician. If I hadn't been expecting it, I never would have noticed. Arthur patted my shoulder firmly, a gesture that made my skin crawl, and walked away. He headed straight back to table 1, taking his place next to his golden boy, Elijah. I looked at the glass in front of me. The bubbles looked exactly the same. But that glass was now a weapon. Across the room, Julian grabbed the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention for one final moment." The room grew quiet. Guests stood up, picking up their champagne glasses. "We want to raise a glass," Julian announced, looking directly at my table. "To the future, to success, and to family." Arthur raised his glass high in the air. Evelyn raised hers. Elijah stood up, grabbing his glass, grinning from ear to ear. I wrapped my fingers around the stem of my poison glass. The crystal felt ice-cold against my skin. I stood up. I didn't stay at table 34. I didn't hide in the shadows anymore. I started walking. I walked straight through the maze of tables, navigating the crowd, carrying the lethal dose of champagne right in front of me. My mother noticed me moving. Her eyes widened slightly in panic, but she couldn't say anything. She couldn't stop the toast. I walked right up to table 1. I stood directly in front of Elijah. He looked at me, raising an eyebrow. "What do you want, Mason? Go back to your corner." I smiled. A massive, warm, terrifyingly calm smile. "Just wanted to toast the man of the hour," I said loudly, ensuring the people around us could hear. I looked at the glass in his hand. "Oh man, you've been holding that a while. Looks like your glass is getting warm. Here, take mine. It's fresh from the tray." Elijah scoffed, his arrogance completely blinding him to the danger. Why would he suspect me? I was the weak little brother. He reached out and snatched my glass from my hand, shoving his slightly warmer glass into my chest. "Whatever," Elijah muttered, raising the poisoned glass high. I looked over his shoulder at Arthur. My father's eyes were the size of dinner plates. He reached his hand out, opening his mouth to scream, to stop the toast, to knock the glass away. But he was too late. To the future, Elijah yelled, and he threw his head back, downing the entire glass of spiked champagne in one massive, greedy gulp. The crystal glass didn't even leave Elijah's lips before the disaster started. He threw his head back and swallowed the entire flute of champagne in one massive, greedy gulp. He slammed the empty glass down on the table, laughing at a joke the man next to him had just made. I stood exactly 2 feet away, my hands hanging casually at my sides. I watched him. I watched Arthur. My father's hand was frozen in midair. He had reached out, a split second too late, to grab the glass from his golden boy. Arthur's face went completely white. All the color drained from his cheeks. He looked like he had just seen a ghost. He knew exactly what was in that drink. He knew the dosage was meant to knock out a grown man who was fully expecting to fight it. Elijah had no idea what was hitting his bloodstream. To the future, Elijah said again, wiping his mouth with a crisp white napkin. Then he blinked. Hard. He shook his head like a dog trying to get water out of its ears. He reached out to grab his fork, but his hand missed the silver handle entirely. His fingers clumsily swiped against the edge of his china plate. The heavy plate spun, knocking over a water goblet. Ice and water spilled all over the expensive linen tablecloth. "Whoa, Elijah! Take it easy," Mr. Sterling chuckled from across the table, thinking my brother had just had a bit too much to drink before the speech. But it wasn't alcohol. It was a heavy, industrial-grade sedative. Elijah tried to stand up. He pushed his hands flat against the table, his chair scraping loudly against the marble floor. His knees buckled instantly. He didn't just stumble. He dropped like a stone. His chin slammed into the edge of the table on his way down. Silverware clattered everywhere. A woman sitting next to him screamed as his dead weight crashed onto the floor, pulling half the tablecloth down with him. The string quartet stopped playing. The low hum of polite conversation vanished. "Elijah!" my mother shrieked. It was a horrible, high-pitched sound. She dropped her wine glass and practically threw herself onto the floor. "Somebody help him! Somebody call an ambulance!" Guests surged to their feet. Chairs were knocked over. Complete chaos erupted. A waiter sprinted past me, shouting into a radio on his shoulder. Men in expensive suits crowded around table 1 trying to get a look. Arthur fell to his knees next to his son. He grabbed Elijah's face, smacking his cheek gently. Elijah's eyes were rolling back into his head. Thick, white foam started to gather at the corners of his mouth. His breathing was shallow and ragged. "What happened? Did he choke?" Mr. Sterling demanded, stepping back from the table in shock. Arthur looked up. His eyes met mine through the panicked crowd. He was sweating profusely. His chest heaved. He looked at me, and in that one fraction of a second, the truth hung perfectly still in the air between us. He knew I had swapped the glasses. He knew his plan had backfired. He had just poisoned his own favorite child. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just stared back at him with absolutely zero emotion. I wanted him to feel the exact weight of what he had done. "He needs air. Give him some space," a guest yelled, pushing people back. My mother was sobbing hysterically, clutching Elijah's limp hand. "He was fine a second ago. What is wrong with him? Arthur, do something." Arthur stood up. His hands were shaking violently. He looked around the room, trying to regain control, trying to put the mask back on. "It's a medical emergency. Please, everyone remain calm. The paramedics are on their way." He was trying to manage the optics. Even with his son foaming at the mouth on the floor, Arthur Kelm was trying to manage the public relations of the situation. It made my stomach turn. But he wasn't going to control the narrative tonight. Not anymore. I looked up toward the back of the ballroom, directly at the tinted glass of the AV booth. I gave a single, sharp nod. Luke was waiting. He didn't hesitate. Suddenly, the massive projector screen hanging over the main stage flickered to life. The bright white light temporarily blinded the guests standing near the front. The room's massive, state-of-the-art sound system crackled. And then, a voice boomed out of the speakers. It wasn't the MC. It wasn't the soft piano music. It was a recording. The audio was incredibly crisp, amplified so loudly that it vibrated in the floorboards. "He's out of control, Arthur. He embarrassed you in front of Henderson." It was my mother's voice. The entire ballroom froze. The panic shouting died instantly. Hundreds of guests stopped moving, their eyes glued to the giant screen. The video was a dark, shaky shot taken through a cracked door, but the voices were unmistakable. "I know, Evelyn, I know." Arthur's voice fired back through the speakers, echoing off the high ceilings. "The kid is a liability. We can't afford to have him talking." My mother, still kneeling on the floor next to Elijah, stopped sobbing. Her head snapped up. She stared at the screen in pure, unadulterated horror. Arthur stumbled backward, bumping into a chair. "Turn that off," he screamed. "Turn the system off right now." But Luke had locked the booth. The audio kept playing, loud and ruthless. "So what do we do?" Julian's voice asked on the tape. "Julian, you still have those prescriptions? The heavy sedatives you take for your flights?" Arthur's recorded voice asked. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Women covered their mouths. The wealthy elite of the city, the people Arthur had spent his entire life trying to impress, were now standing in a circle, listening to a premeditated crime. "Give me 2, Arthur's voice commanded. "Break them open. Put the powder in this napkin. We are going to neutralize the threat. When the servers pour the champagne for the final toast, I'll slip it into his glass. It's strong enough to knock out a horse." Mr. Sterling, the billionaire my parents were so desperate to impress, looked down at the empty champagne flute on the table. He looked at Elijah convulsing on the floor. Then he looked at Arthur. The realization hit him like a freight train. "My God," Mr. Sterling whispered, taking a massive step away from my father. "You drugged him. You tried to drug your youngest son, and you gave the glass to Elijah." No, it's a fake. It's edited," Arthur shouted, his voice cracking in panic. He was looking around wildly, pointing at the speakers. "Mason did this. He's trying to ruin us." The audio on the screen reached its devastating conclusion. "It's risky," Julian noted on the tape. "It's necessary," Evelyn's voice replied coldly. "Do it. Get the powder. I'll make sure the servers distract the table." The video cut to black. The ballroom was dead silent. The only sound was the heavy, labored breathing of Elijah on the floor. No one moved to help Arthur. No one rushed to comfort Evelyn. The crowd physically backed away from them. The people they had hosted, the people they had bought expensive dinners for, looked at them like they were covered in a contagious disease. This wasn't just a scandal. This was the absolute funeral of the Kelm family's social standing. It was over. Aunt Sarah stepped out from the crowd. She didn't look scared. She looked furious. She walked right into the center of the clearing, holding the thick manila envelope high in the air. "It's not a fake," Aunt Sarah said clearly, her voice carrying across the silent room. "My brother is a liar and a thief. He didn't pay a single cent toward Mason's college fund. Mason paid his own way, and Arthur didn't buy that Porsche outside with his own money." Aunt Sarah pulled the loan document out of the envelope and threw it directly onto the table in front of Mr. Sterling. "He forged Mason's signature to take out a high-interest loan because this entire company is bankrupt. They are millions in debt. They threw this party to trick you into giving Elijah a promotion and a contract to save their own skin." Mr. Sterling looked at the forged document. His face hardened into a mask of pure disgust. He didn't say a word to Arthur. He just turned to his daughter, grabbed her arm gently, and said, "We are leaving. Now." As the Sterlings walked away, the heavy double doors of the ballroom burst open. 4 uniformed police officers and 3 paramedics rushed into the room, pushing heavy medical equipment. The hotel manager was right behind them, pointing toward table 1. "Move! Give us room!" a paramedic shouted, dropping a heavy bag next to Elijah and immediately checking his pulse. 2 police officers stepped forward, their hands resting on their duty belts. They looked at the chaotic scene, at the spilled champagne, and at my father. "Who called this in?" the lead officer asked. Wyatt stepped out from behind my table. "I did, officer. And I have the video evidence of attempted poisoning right here on my phone." The officer turned to Arthur. "Sir, I need you to step away from the patient and keep your hands where I can see them." Arthur didn't fight. He didn't argue. He just stood there, his shoulders slumped, his eyes completely hollow. He looked like a deflated balloon. The powerful CO was gone. Only a pathetic, desperate man was left. I stepped forward. The crowd parted for me. I walked right into the center of the mess. I looked down at my mother, who was sobbing with her hands over her face. I looked at my father, who couldn't even meet my eyes. "My whole life, I was told to stay quiet," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but in that silent room, it echoed like thunder. I was told to take the abuse, to stay in the corner, to be the punching bag so this family could pretend to be perfect. Tonight, you all saw exactly why I stayed quiet. Silence is how they win, and I am done being quiet. This is the moment that changes everything, the moment I finally took back control of my life. Thank you so much for your patience and for staying with me until now. You've been amazing. Please give this video a like and comment 1 below to let me know you've made it this far. Not only does this help more people find this story, but it also lets me know that my experiences truly mean something to someone. Your support is my greatest motivation to keep sharing the rest of this journey. The paramedics loaded Elijah onto a stretcher. They strapped him down and immediately started in 4-line. They were moving fast, calling out medical terms I didn't understand. They rolled him out of the ballroom, the wheels of the stretcher squeaking against the marble floor. My mother ran after them, her heels clicking frantically, her expensive dress dragging on the ground. She didn't look back at me once. The police officers surrounded Arthur. They didn't put him in handcuffs yet, but they separated him from the crowd. The lead officer was reading him his rights, asking him to confirm his identity. Arthur nodded numbly. I turned away from them. I walked over to the massive center table where the graduation cake sat untouched. Next to the cake was a small silver tray holding the gifts my parents had supposedly bought for me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the heavy brass keys to their house. I dropped them onto the silver tray. They landed with a sharp clink. I reached up and unpinned the silver family crest from the lapel of my tuxedo. I placed it right next to the keys. Then, I pulled a folded piece of paper from my inside pocket. It was a formal legal declaration I had printed out at the university library 3 days ago. A document officially renouncing any claim to the family inheritance, any claim to their assets, and a strict legal demand that they never contact me again. I dropped it on top of the keys. "These belong to you," I said to the empty air around the table. "I am taking back my name. I am taking back my time. And I am taking back my life." I didn't wait for a response. I didn't wait to see if Arthur was arrested on the spot. I turned my back on the ballroom, on the wealthy guests whispering behind their hands, on the ruined cake and the spilled champagne. I walked straight toward the exit. The heavy glass doors slid open automatically. Wyatt caught up with me in the lobby. He was breathing hard, his phone still gripped tightly in his hand. We walked through the hotel lobby and pushed through the revolving doors into the cool night air. The city was quiet. The cold wind hit my face, and for the first time in 26 years, I took a deep, full breath. The heavy, suffocating weight I had carried on my chest my entire life was completely gone. I wasn't just a survivor anymore. I was free. I looked at Wyatt. He let out a long, shaky exhale. Man, that was intense. "It's over," I said, looking up at the city skyline. "It's finally over." But the truth is, the fallout was just beginning. When you destroy a massive house of cards, the cleanup takes a long time. A month passed. The first few weeks were a complete media circus. The video from the AV booth leaked to a local news station within 24 hours. You can't have a ballroom full of society's elite without someone pulling out a phone and hitting record. The clip of Arthur Kelm plotting to drug his own son went viral. The consequences were swift and absolutely brutal. Arthur was formally charged with attempted poisoning, reckless endangerment, and identity theft. The police found the remaining sedative pills in Julian's bag, and Julian immediately flipped on Arthur to save himself from jail time. He testified that Arthur masterminded the entire thing. The business world reacted exactly how you would expect. Investors pulled their money overnight. Clients canceled contracts. The board of directors held an emergency meeting and ousted Arthur from his own company. The firm filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy a week later. The bank swooped in and seized everything. Elijah survived. The paramedics pumped his stomach at the hospital, and he spent 3 days in the ICU recovering from the heavy dose of sedatives. But his reputation didn't survive. Mr. Sterling, furious about being lied to, used his massive influence to ensure Elijah was blacklisted from every major commercial real estate firm in the state. Worse, Sterling launched an independent review of the water purification project Elijah had presented. He easily discovered the university records proving the project belonged to me. Elijah was publicly exposed as a fraud and a thief. Without his daddy's money to protect him, the golden boy was suddenly just an unemployed, disgraced 28-year-old with zero actual skills. The bank repossessed the brand new Porsche 911 directly from the hospital parking lot. Because Arthur had forged my signature to get the loan, I had to hire a lawyer to clear my name. It took a few weeks of legal fighting, presenting the audio recording and Aunt Sarah's testimony, to prove fraud. The bank dropped the debt from my credit report and went after Arthur instead, adding bank fraud to his growing list of federal charges. My mother, Evelyn, didn't handle the fall from grace well. The society friends she had spent decades kissing up to dropped her instantly. She was uninvited from the charity galas. Her country club membership was revoked. When the money completely dried up and the reality of Arthur's impending prison sentence set in, she filed for divorce. She tried to claim she had no idea about the debt or the poisoning, completely ignoring the fact that her voice was on the recording telling Arthur to neutralize the threat. She fought ruthlessly for custody of whatever assets were left, but there was nothing to take. They were ruined. The final time I saw them was in a sterile, fluorescent-lit conference room at my lawyer's office downtown. I sat on one side of a long mahogany table. Arthur and Evelyn sat on the other side. They looked 10 years older. Arthur was wearing a cheap, off-the-rack suit that didn't fit him right. His hair was thinning, and he had dark circles under his hollow eyes. Evelyn was pale, picking nervously at her fingernails. They sat far apart from each other, refusing to make eye contact. My lawyer slid a thick stack of papers across the table. "These are the cease and desist orders," my lawyer said professionally, "and a non-disclosure agreement. By signing this, you agree to never contact Mason again. You agree to never use his name, his likeness, or his academic achievements in any public setting, press interview, or legal defense. If you violate this agreement, we will sue you for everything you have left." Arthur stared at the paper. His hand hovered over the pen. He looked up at me. His eyes were desperate. He looked like a man drowning, begging for a life raft. "Mason," Arthur started, his voice cracking. "Please, the legal fees. I'm looking at 5 years in minimum security. Your mother is taking the house. I have nothing. You just got that new job. I know your starting salary is significant. If you could just lend me." I held up my hand, stopping him mid-sentence. I looked at the man who had verbally abused me, ignored me, and literally tried to poison my body. I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt an overwhelming sense of pity. "Sign the paper, Arthur," I said coldly. Evelyn leaned forward, tears welling up in her eyes. "Mason, please. We are your family. You can't just abandon us. We made a mistake. We were under so much pressure with the business. Forgive us." "You didn't make a mistake," I replied, staring directly into her eyes. You made a choice. You made a choice to protect your fake image over your own son. You made a choice to call me a leech while you stole my identity. You don't get to play the victim now that the bill has come due. I tapped the paper. Sign it, or we walk out. And my lawyer files the civil suit for emotional damages tomorrow morning. Arthur's jaw tightened. He picked up the pen and signed his name. Evelyn, sobbing quietly into a tissue, signed right beneath him. My lawyer took the papers, stamped them, and placed them in a folder. I stood up, buttoned my suit jacket, and walked out of the conference room without saying another word. I didn't look back. That door closed behind me, and I locked it forever. Fast forward to today. It's been a long journey, but I am finally standing on solid ground. I accepted a position as the lead environmental engineer at a top-tier firm in the city. My starting salary was more than enough to rent a nice apartment overlooking the water. I don't have to work night shifts at the loading dock anymore. I don't have to hide in the shadows. Yesterday, I stood on the muddy banks of a massive river cleanup project. The sun was shining. The wind was blowing off the water. I was wearing a hard hat and holding the blueprints to my water purification system, the exact system Elijah tried to steal. It was finally being built. By me. Aunt Sarah comes over for dinner every Sunday. Wyatt and I are planning a road trip next month. I built a family out of the people who actually respect me, who actually care about me. My grandmother used to have a saying. She used to tell me, "Don't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm." For 26 years, I let my parents burn me alive just to keep their fake, perfect image glowing. I thought taking the abuse meant I was strong. I thought loyalty meant enduring the pain. But true strength isn't about taking the hits. True strength is knowing when to walk away from the people throwing the punches. Justice isn't always a dramatic courtroom battle. Sometimes, justice is just the quiet sound of a door closing behind you, and the peace of mind knowing you never have to open it again. Thank you for sticking around and listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but getting it out there feels like a massive weight off my shoulders. I hope this resonated with you in some way. We all have toxic situations we hold onto for way too long. Have you ever found yourself in a similar situation, having to walk away from people you thought you were supposed to trust? Let me know down in the comments. I read as many as I can. Also, if you made it all the way to the very end of this video, you belong to a special group. You are part of the 1% Club. Drop a comment with the letter W for winner down below. It's our secret code so I can see exactly who the real winners are, the amazing people who stayed with me until the very last second. If you want to hear more stories like this, please hit that like button and click follow. We are building an incredible community here, and I would love to have you along for the ride. Take care of yourselves, know your worth, and I will see you in the next video.